Simon Behrakis MP will discuss the inquiry into the assessment and treatment of ADHD and support services. The Honourable Simon Behrakis is a Liberal member for Clark in the Tasmanian House of Assembly, is a dedicated advocate for housing, economic growth and ADHD awareness. He was diagnosed with ADHD in 2023 and he is the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Inquiry into ADHD. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Yep. Excellent. Look, all right, I'll say a few words and then I'd love to do a hear from what questions people have, but I'll get right into it. Thank you, Rob. Thanks to Kylie and Mel and the rest of the team for including me in this important conference. I'm joining you from the beautiful state of Tasmania in Australia. My name's Simon Behrakis, as Rob introduced me. I'm a member of the Tasmanian House of Assembly. As far as my story, in early 2023, I was diagnosed with ADHD. When I say that I was diagnosed, it would be more correct to call it re-diagnosed. I was told that I had ADHD as a child, and it was a typical story of a kid who was told that he was bright, but if only he just applied himself more in school, otherwise I'd never get anywhere in life, and told that I was disruptive in class and all those truisms that I think many people watching would be familiar with. At the time, the conventional wisdom was that kids would grow out of it, and coupled with all the sensationalist stories that you see on Today Tonight and Current Affair and those shows that Ritalin and other ADHD medications were turning people's kids into zombies, my parents discontinued treatment and I continued to just live my life. As we know, children with ADHD don't grow out of it, and it just presents differently in adulthood. As I found out growing up and struggling with aspects of my life that seemed inexplicably challenging. In 2022, a severe case of burnout gave me cause to reflect on my childhood diagnosis. Spoke to a GP to begin that process of getting re-diagnosed. And the process, I have to say, was arduous and seems specifically challenging for somebody with ADHD, which, as viewers would know, is a condition which is, when untreated, presents with chronic procrastination, bad organisation, and all those sort of things. The process seemed specifically designed to make it as hard as possible for people with those symptoms to navigate. First GP I spoke to was cynical, to say the least, about the concept of me even having ADHD, even though I was previously diagnosed with it, suggesting even that maybe I just had 9 deficiency. Eventually, after some prodding and pushing and urging, they agreed to provide me with a referral, refer me to a psychologist, who told me they were more than happy to provide me with therapy, but they had no idea why I was referred to them because they couldn't diagnose or prescribe, and that was a job for a psychiatrist. So I then had to go back to a GP, a different GP this time, and start that whole process from scratch. And when I started this process to when I sat down with a psychiatrist, got a diagnosis, got a prescription, it was about 10 months, which is a timeline that would have been about 4 months longer if a cancellation hadn't caused an early opening. That period of uncertainty and limbo was a really, really difficult time. It's the closest I've been to saying that I've had depression, feeling burnt out and just treading water and wondering when I'm going to be able to move forward with my life and fix things. Luckily for me, my story does have a happy ending. The good news is, as people know, the majority of cases, ADHD is very treatable, and treatment can be very literally life-changing. Talking to people with lived experiences online, on Facebook and in person, it made it apparent to me that what I experienced, which was difficult for me, was in fact possibly a best-case scenario as far as people's experiences navigating the system. There's people that have to wait much, much longer. There's people facing prohibitive cost to treatments, and other roadblocks. And when I say, me going through that re-diagnosis, that is important because I knew from the beginning of that process what was wrong, so to speak. I never had this I never had that like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why am I having so much trouble with this? I knew, okay, I have ADHD. I need to go through that process. And as someone that's worked in government, works in politics, navigating bureaucracy is something that is part of my day-to-day job, and I found it painfully arduous. So for someone that is confused as to where they are in life, confused as to why they can't, why they're having trouble doing things that other people aren't having trouble with, the difficulties they must face is just something that breaks my heart, to be quite frank. And that's when you hear waiting lists around Australia being so long that in some cases you've got clinics that pop up offering diagnosis for a fee, and sometimes these fees costing as much as $3,000 to jump the queue, which is just call it price gouging vulnerable people, I think is an understatement. The turning the medical care into a transaction and a commoditization, I think, is just the worst thing for medical care, and I think it's an abuse of vulnerable people. Personally, like that's. But it is only something that is available because of the difficulties in accessing care through the normal channels. Current regulatory framework in this space further limits the already limited capacity to treat that condition in Tasmania. My experiences with ADHD haven't been something I've spoken about until recently. For many reasons. Being in a public-facing role, you've got that sort of fear or worry that if I speak about the fact that I have ADHD, or if I let anyone know, then maybe it's going to ruin my career or hurt my career, or maybe people won't take me seriously. When I spoke to my diagnosing psychiatrist, he did say to me, look, you're not even the first politician in Tasmania I've diagnosed. I'm obviously not going to. You guys obviously won't tell you who, but you're definitely not the first one. And this really came to a head for me prior to the election, which was earlier this year, the Tasmanian state election. I had a conversation with the CEO of a local mental health advocacy group, and just in conversation, raised some issues that I had some familiarity with, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. I went through the process not long ago of being diagnosed with ADHD, and I had that exact same experience. And she says, "Oh, I've got ADHD too." Oh, great. She goes, "Do you know you're the first person I've met in the professional world that has ADHD?" I was like, "Well, I promise you that's not the case. I'm just the first person that
submitted it. Yeah,
said it to you, right?" And she did say how it would be so powerful for more people that are in your position that have ADHD to be able to speak about it, to talk about it, and normalize it. Not so much to deal with the issues, but just to make people feel comfortable that they can they can have something like ADHD, but still be, successful, if you want to use that word, but still live fulfilling lives and still do all the things that they want to do in life. And it did give me a bit of reflection, and thought, well, if I'm in a position now where I can do something about, making things better, and I can improve things and talk about things, then I have a responsibility to. And so once the opportunity,
it's easy to say that, it's hard to do, and kudos to you for doing it.
I thank you, because thank you, and on that, look, and I'm now skipping past a couple of things in my speech, but is the fear of what might happen if I spoke about it. When I did, there was nothing but support. So, and that's, in a role such as politics, you stand in a chamber, you've got people from different political parties, everybody's, out to get each other and out to, it's a combative space. And you kind of walk into the chamber thinking, like, am I making a big mistake doing this? People are going to use this against me. And I think one of the best parts of this whole process, and I think a really important part of this process, and it's a really important point to make, to get meaningful change in this space, and it is so important that it's something that everybody be involved in. If it turned into a political issue, it's the government, it's this government's fault this didn't work, or it's that government's fault, people start falling into talking points, people start falling into defensive, lines, and then people jump in their trenches and nothing gets done. But something that I will say has been really positive so far. And what I was able to do in the Tasmanian Parliament is move a motion that the Tasmanian Parliament embark on a parliamentary inquiry into ADHD in Tasmania. And part of that has been so successful so far because all the different parties, all the independent MPs have been very happy for this not to be a partisan issue and to just accept that we, the royal we, have fallen behind where we need to be in this space. More work needs to be done for the sake of everybody in the thousands of people in Tasmania that are experiencing this. And rather than it being a Liberal versus Labor versus Green issue, it's just an issue that we all need to acknowledge that we need to find ways to do better. And I'll acknowledge as well the work that Senator Steele Jordan, the Green Senator, has done. And I see that he's the next speaker.
That's
and
right.
he and I have spoken. He undertook a Senate inquiry a couple of years ago, which did much the same, but in the Commonwealth sense, because in Australia there's certain things fall within the federal jurisdiction, certain things fall within the state jurisdiction, and this Tasmanian inquiry is aimed to complement and build off the work that Senator Steele John and that Senate inquiry has done in a way that's specific to the Tasmanian context, which includes things like prescription regulations, which fall under state, the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, and things like that. But it's just, I just want to reiterate the importance of that. If people want to, in their jurisdictions, try and advocate for change and try and push for similar actions to make things better in their societies, in their jurisdictions, making it as apolitical as possible and making it something that everybody can take ownership of, rather than people jumping into their trenches, is really, really, really important. Otherwise, you just get people trying to manage the issue, and which holds things up. So just some of the examples we have in Tasmania, the we've got maybe, as a state, Tasmania's got a population of a bit over 500,000 people. There's maybe 4 psychiatrists in the state that treat or assess ADHD for adults. Their books are always completely full, and so there is a restriction in the capacity and the resource there, but also the existing protocols and regulations and rules in Tasmania for prescribing and for assessing serve only to stretch those limited resources thinner than they need to, and the level of coordination, the level of standardization is so minimal that anyone can go to any GP and they'll have a completely different experience. Everyone's experience, there is no standardized experience, which is hard for people with ADHD because because of the symptoms that people like me and others that have it have. It's just that much more difficult to try and navigate those systems where there isn't a clear-cut pathway. And then you have these wait times, and you have, no, you went to the wrong specialist, you need to go to that specialist, and it's months and months and months. One of the other issues is the regulation around prescriptions. There's people that have risk of or any history of drug use that then get completely restricted in the methods and the ability to access the important medications they need to treat the condition. And ironically, the untreated ADHD, one of the symptoms is a higher risk of drug taking behavior. You would think that the easiest way to treat those symptoms is to give the medication that they need, but as soon as someone has a risk of drug taking behavior, we're going to make it harder to access that treatment. We have in Tasmania, arbitrarily, you cannot access ADHD medication after 70 years of age. We don't have GP co-prescribing, which means that the psychiatrist books are just full of people like me who have to go there every 6 months or so to get my scripts redone. which is something a GP could very, very easily do, instead of assessing people that are waiting in line that are, have their lives on hold like I did for 10 months. These are just some of the issues, and there's numerous issues, and it's a space that I don't understand. I'm not a medical healthcare expert, neither are the majority of my colleagues in the parliament. So it's very easy for me to identify 2 or 3 things that need to be done and say and advocate for them. But I think
So
the reason why Senator Steele John's Senate inquiry was successful, and what I'm hoping to get out of this parliamentary inquiry, is actually listening to the numerous people that have lived experiences, the numerous medical healthcare professionals, and have like a comprehensive list of findings and recommendations based on people that know what they're talking about, not just politicians that think that they know what they're talking about, and then recommending to government action based on those things. So, so you look like you're about to say something, Rob.
Yeah, sorry, just it actually leads to my first question, so I might ask it now.
Yeah,
Given the inquiry, but we'll go back a step. Did you say that there's four psychiatrists that can prescribe, or sorry, diagnose people with ADHD in Tasmania?
I
In
think
adults?
it's 4. It's somewhere. It's like 3 or 4 or 5, but it's a very, very, very small number for a population of 500 something thousand people.
No, so
So
therefore,
it's very limited.
right. So from the inquiry, does that what sort of information did you get in terms of being able to reduce the waiting list? Sorry, I just got a bit of noise in the background. Reduce the waiting list and streamline the process. You mentioned GPs doing scripts. What else would it involve?
A part of it is, look, we're actually at the early stage of the inquiry. The inquiry has only just sort of started. We've just got the submissions in. Submissions have closed, so we're still going through all the written submissions, and then we had the first hearing, I think, a fortnight from now. So we're still at the early stages of that process, but a lot of it is about giving GPs more involvement, standardization of the treatment. If somebody presents with this, have some level of standardization, making it easy to access the medication. There's a lot of difficulties people have in interacting with the pharmaceutical, the PSB, the Pharmaceutical Services Board. Apologies. But there's numerous recommendations. One of the ones that has come to us, which is also a recommendation under the Senate inquiry, was a recommendation to adopt the ADPA guidelines for assessment and treatment. So that's pretty comprehensive on its own, and they're great places to start at the very least. But a big part of it is just acknowledging that this is something that we can't just take a status quo approach to. So it's what do you call it? It's something that I'm hoping will actually help really identify those main headline issues, and also those little issues that people that work in the medical healthcare space know where those touch points are. Like I don't know that. I'm not a medical healthcare expert. I just know that there's from firsthand experience from talking to people where those difficulties are. It's just even giving people that. I think we're in a lucky stage in 2024. 5, 6, 10 years ago, I think if I was to come out publicly, or others were to come out publicly and say I've got ADHD, that could be the end of a career. People won't take you seriously. And I think we're now in a place where we can, I can talk about it, and it's been a positive thing for me to talk about. I've spent a fair bit of time with imposter syndrome. You're sitting in council, sitting in the Tasmanian Parliament, and have had people take video captures of me posted on Facebook of me fidgeting and looking around and picking and saying, oh look, Simon's not paying attention, Simon doesn't care what's going on, he's just buggering around. No, I actually was listening. If anything, if I'm trying to look like I'm listening, I'm focusing more on listening than I am on actually paying attention, right? So that's the ironic thing there. But it's something that people that are going through a difficult time with this need to know that it's something that they can be spoken about. And I think a lot of people have found just the conversation in the news and whatnot that's occurred around this, and likewise with the Senate inquiry, has just been empowering, if for nothing else other than to give them an opportunity to say, yeah, this is what I'm going through. It's there's just a big part of this whole issue is that there's just such a huge lack of understanding around the issue. That's where that stigma comes from. There's people that say, oh, it's just a bunch of hyperactive kids that need more discipline. I grew up in a traditional Greek household, and I'll tell you, I got plenty of discipline. Didn't cure anything. We announced some policies during the state election. They were, I think, minor in the scheme of what needs to be done in the space, but I think beneficial. And posted it to my social media, and one of the comments that I got were, I don't want to sound cynical or nothing, but it just seems a bit funny that ADHD didn't seem to exist before the 1990s, and now suddenly everybody seems to have ADHD. That one of those sort of comments. And the reality is, ADHD didn't exist before the 90s, the same way gravity didn't exist before Isaac Newton discovered it. It's always been there. So look, I've got a lot more I could say, but correct. And so look, I've got a lot more that I could say, but I'm actually really interested in if people have questions and just get a conversation going. I think it's really important that people use the where we are in 2024, where there's an openness to have these conversations, to use that to drive some change, to make things better. Because I don't think that there's improvements that need to be made in Tasmania. Well, there are, but it's we need to catch up in Australia. We need to catch up in I don't know if there's any country that's kind of gotten it right yet. We need to be able to talk about these things if you want to get to where we need to be, so that people that need support are able to get it and live fulfilling lives. So, in your hands, Rob.
Yeah. So, well, you talked about stigma and the importance of reducing and hopefully removing stigma. What sort of strategies would you recommend that we undertake with the general public, but also the medical fraternity as well, in terms of going about reducing that stigma?
I think a big part of it is just talking about it. And I think the more people, I don't know about from the medical side, it's not something I don't know too much about the perspective of that side. But I think, we've got Australian celebrities and comedians and actors and actresses, and, myself and Senator Steele John and others that work in the public roles that are now coming out talking about it. I think the more people that are able to do that and to just show that vulnerability, speak about what their experiences are, because I think so many people see ADHD as hyperactive kids bouncing off the wall, causing trouble in class. Like that's what the everyday person that doesn't know about it thinks that's what ADHD is. It's a person that can't concentrate. It's a person that doesn't do things that they're supposed to do, and is disruptive and all that. But to see, you've got senators, you've got actors and actresses, the people that you see on TV and respect them, like they've got it. They're successful people. It's not just correct. You do, and it's not just that stereotype. It's it's not high. My hyperactivity often isn't outward hyperactivity. It's me not being able to shut off or slow my brain down. And the days where I'm, where my symptoms are at their worst, I actually accomplish almost nothing that day, but then just get home exhausted, feeling like I've worked an 18-hour shift, but I've done almost nothing because I feel like I've a car spinning its tires. Like you're not going anywhere, but you're revving to the red line. That looks like someone that's sluggish and tired, but it's actually hyperactivity. So it's the more people are able to just talk about it, the more people that hear those conversations can understand what it actually is, rather than what people think that it is. And because a lot of the misunderstanding and stigma just comes from an understanding of ADHD, I think, that existed in the year 2000 when people were watching those current affair videos about Ritalin turning your kids into zombies. That's what people like. I know people that think that's what their view of ADHD is.
That analogy you had with the car is an interesting one. My son's got ADHD. He's a very bright boy, very bright boy. But I say he's like a Ferrari, 1,000 horsepower, but ball tires. It's worse when it rains, you know. But
Yeah.
also that same kid has extraordinary ability to solve problems that others don't as well, because he does think laterally. He does have many hypotheses at once. It's just pulling it all together and putting it in a meaningful format. So it's a blessing as well. But yeah.
If you can manage it and control it and treat it. And, it's, I've, especially when you have that, not to say this, it feels weird saying this about myself, but when you've got that kind of bright kid with ADHD that's got an above average intelligence, you get that, it's one of the most painful things to hear is when people say, "Oh, you're so smart, but you're so dumb. Like, how do you, you have someone as smart as you not able to do these things, and how can you not concentrate when you're able to do all these things and you can't pay your bills on time? What sort of, it's such, it makes it's like people have this, because they think, oh, this person, it's so common. You have so many kids and people with ADHD that are really bright. So you have this expectation, oh, that person's smart, but how come you're such a, it's like such a missed potential sort of person. It's such a common story. And being able to understand what they're going through is, I think, the best way to identify that. Sometimes, how many people have gone through life without ever knowing that they've had ADHD.
Yeah.
And that's just who they are. When you say to a kid or an adult, you have people, oh, he was so smart, he just never got there in life. He never did what he was,
Just needs to apply himself.
Well, yeah, that's, telling a kid, oh, you're bright, but you just need to apply yourself, or, if only you paid more attention. It's telling someone who has a medical, it's a medical condition, it's a mental health condition, that the issues that they're experiencing are one of moral failure because they're choosing not to apply themselves. And the impact that has on someone when you're telling you, it's like, oh no, it was your choice not to pay attention. It was your choice not to do the thing you were supposed to do. It's yeah, sure, but like that doesn't work that way. And,
yeah.
You can promise to yourself, I'm going to tomorrow I'm going to do all these things that I've been to do, and you're not lying to yourself. You 100% mean it. But once you get in the car and try and drive off, those tires are spinning. And people say, oh, you chose not to drive off. That's not, to use that analogy. And it's for a lot of people having that. They're being told that what the circumstances they're in are a result of their own choices and moral failure. So it's it's a harmful thing, but it comes from people not understanding what it's like.
Simon, I just got one question on the feed. It said that you mentioned that it was the early days of the Tasmanian inquiry. What are the next steps, and what does that look like, and what does success look like for the Tasmanian inquiry?
So that's a really good question. Where we're at the moment, submissions have closed. So we've got about 60 something submissions that are in the process of getting uploaded onto the Tasmanian Parliament website. It's groups like ADPA, it's groups like the College of Physicians, it's then also people with lived experiences talking about the difficulties they've faced, and also the government submission. That's, some of them are a page, some of them are 50, 60 pages. So there's a bit of reading to do. I've done a bit of reading already, but in typical ADHD, what do you call it? As a typical person with ADHD, I'm going to do most of that reading probably the day before the first hearing. But the first hearing's on the 18th of October. Quite. I finished writing my speech for this on Tuesday, which I thought was actually quite good for me. But we are going. So 18th of October we start the hearings. There'll be about 3-4 sessions of hearings. It is also it's a first for the Tasmanian Parliament, as far as actually changing the way that we do our inquiry process to make it more accessible and friendly for people with ADHD. So we rather than expecting everyone to give a fulsome written submission, which most inquiries do, people can say, obviously for some people, the idea of writing a submission to a parliament's worse than a university assignment, which, it's a big thing. You can just say, hey, you can send an email to the inquiry. My name's such and such. I've got ADHD. I'd love to talk about my experiences, and that's being included. We're doing roundtables that aren't going to be live streamed or publicised, so that people that aren't comfortable speaking to a committee in a hearing setting can still get their views and their experiences out there. And we're doing quite a few things like that to make it as easy and as comfortable for people that are, feeling a bit vulnerable, talking about themselves like this, as well as just making these submissions in the context of having the symptoms of ADHD, to be able to do that. So that's, I think, a really positive thing just for the Tasmanian Parliament. Then we will write a report, we'll have findings, we'll have recommendations. And my hope would be that the recommendations complement the recommendations of the Senate inquiry. And importantly, the next step after that, and this is, I think, the really important thing. It's why I think it's so important that this hasn't been a partisan political issue, is that the governments, and I say this as a member of the governing party. So it's important the governments actually take on board and seriously consider, and then hopefully start adopting or seriously considering some of the recommendations that come out of this. I've really avoided getting political as much as possible for the reasons I've already said. But I can't remember what date last year. I think it was earlier last year. The Senate inquiry tabled its report into the Australian Parliament. Had a range of recommendations. A lot of them are really important recommendations, and the government hasn't written a response to the inquiry, let alone looked at adopting any of the recommendations. So it's all great and amazing and fantastic to make all these findings, do all this work, give all these recommendations, but it needs to be something that the government's willing to actually take on board and seriously consider adopting some of those recommendations. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. But so far, the Premier, the ministers have all been very, very supportive of this whole process. So I've got a lot of hope, and I hope there's at the very least something that helps kick into gear some of those changes and some of those adoptions at the Commonwealth level.
Well, so thank you very, very much. I just want to say that the work that you have done so far and continue to do is an inspiration for the ADHD community, because there is no way that we can rise to the challenge and celebrate the pluses as well of ADHD if we don't have friends and supporters and boosters in all parts of the community, particularly in Parliament. So it's a major effort. It's an inspiration. We thank you very much. And as we get more questions in, we'll forward them to you, because I think
please do, yeah.
Dialogue, yeah. But thank you, sir.
Right, thank you.
You're very busy portfolio. I do.
Busy day. And thanks so much for having me on. It's an honour to have been invited on here, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing. And I look forward to watching some of the other presenters.
Honour to have you, sir. Thank you very much.